Well, thank you, young ladies, for that beautiful music. I appreciate it. And Deb, for your original song you wrote and shared with us here today. And good to know somebody was listening the last couple of weeks and drew in a lot of those themes. The older brother was right. That doesn't mean that he was good. The older brother was right, but that doesn't mean he was good. Following is an unpleasant story. Shiro Ishii served as a surgeon general for the Japanese army during World War II. It's not possible to engage in war with even the best intentions without committing a sin of some kind or another, but he was one of the worst. Shiro Ashii was in charge of Unit 731 as Surgeon General with the Japanese Army. It was a unit that was developing chemical and biological weapons and used prisoners of war to test them on. They referred to the prisoners of war as logs because basically they treated them like objects. In many cases, in order to see what the effect of the biological or chemical agents were, he would perform surgery on the prisoners without anesthesia. At the end of the war, unlike many war criminals who were tried and executed, it turned out there were a couple of people in the U.S. Army that wanted to learn what he had learned and to see his results and use them. And so they provided protective cover for him, brought him to the United States, and eventually he was able to return to Asia to live out the rest of his life. At some point, he moved to South Korea, where many of the prisoners that he had tortured came from. And he opened up a free hospital and focused on serving children. On his deathbed, he was baptized and converted to Christianity. So he gets to go to heaven, right? Do we have to go to the same heaven? Can't we have a separate one? The older brother was right. After Jesus in his parable said a certain man had two sons, we don't hear from the older brother again until he returns from the field. Now, the word used for older here, presbyteros, from which one denomination takes the name Presbyterian, means elder, means wise, means responsible. So this is not just an older brother. The responsible brother is out in the field doing the work that needs to be done while everybody else is at a party. Didn't they go and get him? Didn't they let him know that they're having a party for the younger son who wasted all the money, who sold a portion of his father's farm, cashed it out, went to Vegas, lived high on the hog for a short period of time, then hit rock bottom, and then decided it might be nice to go back home? It says here that as he was coming in from the field and getting close to the house, he heard symphonios. We get the word symphony from that, which means loud music. And choron. We get the word chorus or chorus girls. He heard chorus girls. He heard dancing women. This man has just wasted money on wine, women, and loud, happy song. And what is waiting for the older brother? wine, women, and loud, happy song. Girls dancing around, loud music for the guy that wasted all the money, and nobody even bothered to go out and get him. Like you showed up somewhere and everybody's having a great party. You just happened to drop in, and they're having a great old time. You weren't invited. The older brother was right. And we know it because most of us are the older brother. Oh, we've strayed a little bit, most of us. But we're never going to qualify. Most of us are never going to qualify for the thing that some preachers love to do in church. Bring one person up after another to tell how low they sank, how they hit rock bottom, how low it was before they were pulled up by the love of Jesus and a helping hand and saw the light and came back and they have had their life changed. We love those testimonies. A few of us might have a good one, but most of us, we'd have to really dig deep. One of my friends had a preacher who came from that tradition where you're supposed to have a story, of your sinful life. And the best his preacher could do was that one day he came to Chicago with his 2 cardboard suitcases, put them down, saw the big city of Chicago, saw those loose women walking down the road, and thought about it. That was it. He just thought about it. Now, he knew, everybody in that church knew this guy would never have walked up to one of those women without getting tongue-tied. That didn't matter. He was trying hard. We love that cattle call when we run them across the stage and say, okay, what's your testimony? How did you stray? The older brother has never strayed. Most of us really haven't done a good job of straying. When our names get called up yonder, people are going to go, who? Because they're looking for the big sinners. There was an old poem the brethren used to say, the old brethren. They called themselves Dunkers. I'm Dunker born, I'm Dunker bred, and when I'm gone, I'm Dunker dead. In other words, you can count on me. I'm not doing anything. I'm not straying. I'm not sinning. They used to say at funerals of the old brethren, he filled his place. Showed up on time. Cows never had to wonder when he was going to show up. Never had a hangover. Boring. But I understand the older brother. The servants come out. He's really angry because the servants come up and say, oh, didn't you hear? Your brother that was lost is back. And we're having a big party. And so he refuses to go in. Now here, just as the younger brother insulted the father by saying, Dad, you're dead, give me my money, the older brother should be the one to go in to confront his father. Instead, I'm going to stand out here till he comes to me, and he does. And he doesn't address his father as Father, Happy Father's Day. He just says, listen, like giving an order. Listen, I have slaved for you, not worked. I have slaved for you and done everything that you asked. And you never gave me even a goat. He got the fatted calf, but I don't even get a goat. Now, nothing against goats over there. We're getting them ready. Goats are great. My late father-in-law bought 2 goats to eat all the poison ivy, and they would, as long as he tore it up and fed it to them by hand. He says, and this son of yours, remember I told you the word for estate is life? This son of yours who ate up your life, not spent it, ate it up. Ate up your life with loose women. You give him the fatted calf. What do you say to that? I think we've already said that in some ways the father was not functioning fully, that whatever had frozen him, the loss of a wife, or a wife who was too ill or who had left, or we don't even know the nature of what had happened. But he was wounded too. Wounded enough that he gave the younger son everything that he wanted, which is ridiculous. And in the meantime, the older brother has overcompensated by bending over backwards, doing all the work, not trusting anyone else to take care of it. Maybe they couldn't find him to tell him about the party, because who knows? He's gone before dawn and he's not back till it's dark. And he's got his own list. He may not even stop and say, hey, Dad, today I'm going to be heading out over that place where some of the older olive trees are, and I'll be working on them. Want to dig up around them, put a little more manure. I got my plans. Maybe he hasn't even talked to him. I don't know. But you know something? The dad's going to say something amazing, because he has welcomed back the younger son with open arms, clothed him, and is throwing a feast. But he says, child. The word here is child. Everything I have is yours. I'm not dividing the property up again. I have forgiven the younger son. I have welcomed him back. He will never want. But I'm not dividing it up again. There's some things you can't get back. He's saying to all of us older brothers who haven't strayed, don't you realize that for you, heaven has already begun? We may have a deathbed confession. We are welcomed into heaven and the kingdom of God as equals. But for some of us, the beauty of a sunrise has not been tainted by this desire for emptiness. Instead, we've been able to look at the beauty around us with God's eyes. We've been able to see other people with God's eyes. We are living in heaven now, even though we struggle and suffer. We know that our suffering is only for a time, and that God is walking with us during the hardest of times. Everything I have is yours, child. And he reminds him, your brother was dead, and he has come back to life. And then, come on, Jesus, give us the ending. Tell us that the older brother went on in with his father, and the two brothers hugged and wept. But he doesn't do that, because you know why? The ball's in our court. We are the ones who are writing the ending here. We are the ones who have to remember that all of the glories of the earth, all of the joys and honest pleasures which God have given are ours. Jorge Maldonado, who was a pastor and also a counselor in family services and family systems, and I consulted many books, but from one of his books, I got some of the ideas for this series. You know, he talks about a Central American immigrant that he was counseling. And the immigrant told him the story that, you know, he came to America, and he worked hard, and he set up a bank account, and now he was able to finally send money back home. He bought himself a checkbook just to celebrate that had pictures of the beautiful landscapes of America, the natural wonders, the national parks. And on each one of those, you know, he would look at it and think about a place he would visit someday and that he wanted his mother to see, and so he would write her a check. Every month he would write her a check, a good check, a big check, and mail it to her in Central America. But after a while, he began to notice these checks weren't being cashed. And he began to worry. Were they getting to her? Was somebody stealing them? Why weren't they being cashed? Was something wrong with her? So, as you know, it's not easy to necessarily get out of this country and get back if you're not necessarily fully documented. All you're doing is supporting the economy of our country and doing great things and proving what a great place we live in, the United States of America, to which people want to come to. But anyway, this immigrant went back to Central America, and he found his mother's house, and he walked in, and before he could say anything, his mother said, "I want to show you something." And she took him to her simple bedroom, and there on the wall were all the checks taped to the wall on display. And the mom said, "You sent me these beautiful pictures. I am so proud of you. And so I had to put them on display so I could see what a wonderful son I have." And then Jorge in his book says, you know what? Sometimes we Christians have to cash the checks. Sometimes we Christians have to cash the checks. Because you know what? Nothing has stopped the older brother from having a party with all his friends with a fatted calf. He's running the place. The only thing that's stopping him is he can't stop working. He can't stop proving to himself that he is the responsible one. He can't stop proving to himself that he's the only one that cares about this place while the rest of it's falling apart. You know, our destiny is joy, and we are allowed to experience that joy today and every day. Indeed, one reason we can enjoy the joy is we are willing to work hard. We are willing to be the older brother. But as been pointed out, you better cash the checks. No ending except the ending that you write. I talked at the beginning about the Japanese Surgeon General who was converted on his deathbed, baptized, and we presume in heaven. Here's another story from the same era. Eric Lomax, 1919 to 2012, served in the British Army during World War II in the Pacific. He was captured early in the war, was made a prisoner of war by the Japanese, and was put to work in brutal conditions in construction. Indeed, the movie The Bridge Over the River Kwai is based upon what occurred to his unit. But of course, the movie, being made when it was prettied up in a lot of ways. It does not show the depth of brutality to which the prisoners were subjected. The torture, the starvation, and the hard work were beyond imagining. One guard in particular, Nashimi Takasho, made it his duty and perhaps pleasure to brutalize Eric Lomax. Lomax survived the war and went on to live a very long life and seemed to function well, becoming very successful in business. But gradually things began to unravel. His marriage fell apart. He was alienated from his children. As he said later in a book he wrote, when you're a survivor of torture, it never goes away. But gradually, he came into contact with the Reconciliation Project, who worked with him because he hated all things Japanese and all Japanese. And eventually, he learned that the man who had tortured him during the war was working for children's ministries, had become a Buddhist, and was doing his best in his mind to make up for his sins. An arrangement was made for the two to meet on a bridge over the River Kwai. All his life, he had thought of putting his hands around this man's neck and strangling him until he was dead, doing it with his own hands. And he still felt like that's what he was going to do. He felt like he was cooperating with his agency, this organization, so he could get his hands on this man. But when they met, Tashiki wept, begged his forgiveness, confessed his sins, and the two men fell into each other's arms weeping. As Lomax would write, when it comes to forgiveness, somebody has to take the first step, or the world will disintegrate in hatred. He went on to live several more years, a happier man, more at peace with himself. That's the ending he wrote as the older brother who had served his country and who had suffered greatly. Every one of us has probably wronged somebody, but it's more in our mind who has wronged us. Every one of us has gotten some credit for some things, but we often feel like other people are getting more credit. Certainly more credit than they deserve. Jesus was smart. Leave the story where it is and let us think about it. As I close, I want to read, one person on the internet called this the best poem ever written. It's one of the worst poems ever written. I mean, in terms of poetry, rhyme, meter, and everything else. So another person wrote that it's one of the best of the worst poems ever written. There was an old codger in a church that I served a couple churches back. He always worried when he held out his hand for the mic during Joys and Concerns. He might be going to get up to say something nice about somebody or make a good testimony, or he might get ready to go on a 40-minute rant, which I had seen him do that nobody could stop him, about who knows what. But 2 or 3 times a year, he wanted to recite this poem, and it's thankfully very short. It's called Surprise in Heaven, and it's anonymous. I dreamt death came the other night, and heaven's gate swung wide. An angel with a halo bright ushered me inside. And there, to my astonishment, stood folks I'd judged and labeled as quite unfit, of little worth, and spiritually disabled. Indignant words rose to my lips, but never were set free. For every face showed stunned surprise. Yes, every face showed stunned surprise. Oh, every face showed stunned surprise. No one expected me. Let's remember that, all of us older brothers, and give thanks to God. Amen.